Hello everybody, my name is Joshua and I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of Coffee, Cats, and King. Now, obviously setup is different today. That is because this is that special project that I kept alluding to, kept talking to you people about a long time ago. And this is retake number, 1003, something like that. I've done it in so many ways I can't even count. But I think this is going to be the way that actually works. I think this is going to be the one that makes it to you fine folks. I really hope so. So, I have talked before with some of you about the fact that I am a writer, that I would like to one day be a published author. I have talked to some of you about the fact that I would like to try my hand at narrating audiobooks. So, I thought, why not combine the two? Narrate one of my stories and just see how it goes. See what you fine folks think. So, that is this. I'm going to be alternating between footage here, just kind of showing you guys the behind the scenes of what I'm doing. Very simple setup for me, because I've never done this before. I have my microphone, and I have my coffee. Should have my water, because I know I'm going to need it, but I don't. So that is completely on me. I've got my story here, have my system set up, and we're just going to see how it goes. Now, before I get started, the following story contains graphic violence, strong language, and some very terrible sexual innuendos. So, if these things bother or disturb or upset you, please just exit the video now, and you can come back next week for our regularly scheduled programming with more bookish related content. For those of you still around, please note that 1, the material you're about to hear has not been published. 2, this video is not necessarily going to be very visually appealing. It's more going to be about listening. And 3, the views expressed in this story are not my own. They are fully the characters. So, I hope you guys enjoy. Let me know what you think. And let's get into it. The story for today is titled Graverobbing for Ghouls.
How much further? Quit your whining, Mickey. We'll get there when we get there. I'm not whining. I'm just saying that maybe they didn't need to bury him so fucking far from everybody else.
Mickey wished his voice hadn't sounded quite so whiny when he said that. He hated proving Colin right. Maybe he'd give Mickey a break just this once and ignore the obvious slam.
Damn it, Mickey, you can't even defend yourself without sounding like a preteen girl. Just shut your mouth and walk.
After a minute or two of silence, Colin added,
It is kind of far, though. You think he just wasn't good enough to be buried with the other stiffs?
Colin cursed himself for saying it when he heard Mickey sniffle behind him. Despite how annoying he found the little creep, even Colin's stony heart went out to the Mick. Nobody should have to see their hero gunned down that way, especially not a kid in Mickey's condition.
Hey, Colin? Yeah, Mickey.
How do you think he looks? I mean, do you think they cleaned him up at all, or just threw him in the hole the way he was?
Colin couldn't think of how to answer. The way these men worked, they'd probably toss Fletcher in a pit by a bunch of other unfortunate unclaimed criminals and called it a job well done. Then again, Fletcher was a pretty special kind of criminal.
You know, Mickey,
he said at last, pulling himself up the rope they were using to scale the cemetery wall.
I think Fletcher's probably got his own tomb and everything.
We'll know soon, huh?
The determination in the kid's voice made Colin almost proud of him. Then Mickey slipped coming down the rope, yelled out, and began to cry when a snap issued from the wrist he landed on. Colin knew a few things at once. Thanks to Mickey's new injury, the night's grunt work would fall to Colin, which included taking out the security guard that had just been alerted to their presence, and, more importantly, his bladder was about to burst if he didn't open fire on one of those graves. Sure enough, immediately after falling, Mickey said,
Now how the hell am I going to use a shovel like this?
Immediately after, they heard the sound of security coming their way.
Shit! Sorry, Colin. What do we do now?
Jesus help him, Colin didn't know how he was going to get through the night without slapping this kid silly.
Let me think for a minute, Mickey.
He heard the guard's footsteps approaching from the direction they needed to go.
Figures. They probably got someone camped out right at Fletcher's tomb. think it'd be as easy as I hoped. He tapped at the handle of his shovel, his eyes doing a mad dance over the darkened landscape, as if aiding him in searching for a solution. He was all too aware of security shuffling closer and closer. At last, he gave a frustrated growl. Well, Mickey, we're gonna have to eat the guy. Mickey's face lit up in shock. Colin, no! I told you, man, I'm a vegetarian now. Besides, I thought you said we didn't want to mess up and attract attention. He realized the moment too late that he'd said something very stupid. Maybe that would have worked if you hadn't already done both those things. But you did, and now the only option is to eat them. And you better fucking believe that you're gonna help with it. Although Mickey's stomach roiled at the thought, he knew that this time he would have to step up and take one for the team. It was, after all, his fault the guard had heard them. It was also his brother they were digging up, and he'd already ruined his digging hand. Really, the only contribution he could still make would be to eat the security sap. This kind of scenario was the very reason Mickey became vegetarian. He still loved the taste of meat and believed anyone who said differently was a damn liar. He just hated seeing innocent creatures killed for it. Take the poor security guard, for instance. In Mickey's mind, the unfortunate man was old, probably retired from the military. Mickey always saluted his veterans, and took the job expecting, at most, to scare away a couple of necking teenagers. Once again, Mickey was wrong. If an uglier, meaner-looking human being existed, then Mickey had never met him. This guy looked like he'd been born with a lemon in his mouth and a bee in his bassinet. He had the prematurely wrinkled, rumpled face of a man accustomed to scowling and snarling life away. Mickey's first thought was that he had the look of a man who would answer the door on Halloween just to steal children's candy and then yell at them for disturbing his night. This type of security guard didn't gently shoo curious youngsters out of the graveyard. He'd use force even after they complied. In short, even before meeting him, Mickey understood that the guard was a grade-A, well-seasoned asshole, and he felt a whole lot better knowing it. As the man with the maglite approached, Colin dropped his shovel quickly alongside the fence. Looking to his partner, he asked, "You ready, Mick?" "Ready." They sprang out of hiding at the same time that Edgar Ang, or just Ang to his friends, of which there were none, rounded the bend of Quadrant 4. The cemetery wasn't really big enough to need quadrants, but Ang liked structure in the workplace, and so he'd spent a considerable amount of his personal time meticulously mapping the cemetery layout and its surrounding area before breaking it all down into 12 quadrants and making copies for the funeral home and office. It didn't matter that, other than the owner and undertaker, he was the only full-time staff member. The lady who subbed for him on the weekends had probably never even looked at it, despite Ang's insistence on hanging it along every wall of the guard shack. In fact, he'd often thought that she didn't even bother patrolling the grounds when she worked. When he came back after a day off, he'd usually find beer bottles, condom wrappers, and similar signs of the delinquency she failed to stop. Unfortunately, last night was one of those nights. He'd spent half the evening cleaning up messes left behind by fucking vagrant bums and horny teens. He couldn't decide which group he despised more. As he worked through quadrants 12 to 5, always working backwards to quadrant 1, the entrance, he wondered when people became such despicable animals. A sully, hallowed ground for some booze and boobs. Disgusting. So when he heard someone yelp in pain somewhere in the dark, it got his blood boiling. Trespassers, probably the same from last night. Well, they might have gotten away with it on Ellie's watch, but not his. He'd take his baton to them if he got the chance, really teach the hoodlums to stay out. Ang didn't bother masking his presence. Let the little shits run scared. He'd still catch at least one of them, and he'd make damn sure to leave the brats with a few reminders not to come back. It brought a vicious grin to his face just thinking about it. He rounded the corner anticipating a bunch of teens scattering like jackrabbits in the brush, with one or two caught deer in the headlights style. Edgar Ang was very, very wrong, and soon just as sorry. Mickey belched loudly. "Damn, that was good! Do they taste better when they're bad? Seasoned with evil or something?" He laughed at his own joke, and Colin couldn't help but grin. That cranky son of a bitch had tasted damn good. Maybe Colin just hadn't had a good meal in a while. He patted his overstuffed stomach and yawned. "All right, Mickey, let's get to work before those carbs put me out." With the security guard disposed of, there was no longer any reason for subtlety. The men belched a few more times, stretched their limbs, and got to work making their way toward Fletcher's tomb. Mickey longed to shed his human skin and release the hidden monstrosity beneath, but knew he wasn't ready. His brother had said as much before getting shot up. Fletch was the one who had walked Colin and Mickey through the ritual of becoming ghouls in the first place, and he'd stressed to them that it would take a long time for them to be able to transform into something more than the fleshy meat bags they were. In the meantime, Mickey had to settle for sucking blood and honing his new nightlife. And boy, was there a lot of blood. In fact, they were both positively drenched in it after eating that guard. The term ghastly drooling zombies would have described either one of them at the moment, but saying so to their faces would have likely ended in a fashion similar to Edward Ang. Mickey would argue that ghouls are a far stretch from mindless zombies. Zombies, wasteful creatures that they are, ravaged a body and only actually ate the organs. Ghouls didn't leave a drop of blood or speck of flesh behind. If you had to kill something, at least have the decency not to waste it. Mickey hated zombies more than anything else in the world. He never actually met one, but he was pretty sure you didn't have to meet your enemy to hate him. Colin grinned at him in the dark. "You ready to bring your brother home?" Mickey nodded, a smile creeping across his bloodied face.
Hello, Earth to Dean. Are you gonna do me or what?
Shit. Stacy was getting impatient. Could she tell he was stalling? Just because he played quarterback for their school, she, along with everyone else, seemed to think that he spent half his time getting laid and the other half thinking about getting laid. What no one realized was that Dean McAllister was still a virgin. A virgin who really didn't want his first time to be in a boneyard. Yeah, baby. I'm about to give it to you good." Dean, of course, had no plans to give her anything, but he hadn't yet found a good excuse not to. Based on how quick she'd been to strip, she wanted him right then and there. This was Stacy Beckenmeyer, for God's sakes. Every guy at school, teachers included, wanted to bone her. Half of them probably had, for that matter. If he was going to do it, why not do it with the most experienced girl in town? Just as he'd finally worked up enough nerve to go for it, he heard footsteps. "Stace? Put your shirt back on, there's someone coming."
Well, it's definitely not me,
she huffed, sleeping her head through her easy makes things hard tank top. One of her girls got it for her as a joke, but Stacy wore the trashy thing when she wanted to send a crystal clear message to her date. She didn't really want to do it in a cemetery, but guys were into that shit for some reason. Whatever. The way tonight was going, no one was getting laid. None of her usual tactics were working. She'd actually started thinking that she could put it in and get things going for him, and he still wouldn't bang her. She seriously didn't know what the hell was wrong with this guy. And now some dirty hobo was giving him another reason to back out. When did it get so hard to find privacy at 1 a.m? Not bothering to put pants on, she pushed her way past Dean and yelled, "What's your problem, dick? You know it's illegal to spy on people." "It's kind of illegal for us to be here too." "Oh, shut up, Dean. I mean it," she said, pointing a perfectly manicured nail at him. "The next time you open your mouth tonight, it better be to suck my tit. And you," she started, turning toward the intruder. Her next words probably weren't intended to be incoherent gurgling, followed by the wet splashes of her violent death, just like how Dean didn't plan to sprint off screaming. As he ran off screaming, Dean heard one of the men say, "Shit, Mickey, now we gotta eat him." This was becoming a bigger pain in his ass than Colin had expected. He knew going in that Mickey would mess up, and they'd have to kill the guard. That's why he'd postponed the plans until tonight. No sense in killing the cute chick when they could wait a day and take out the mean bastard instead. He'd neglected to mention any of this to his partner, of course, instead passing it off as a surprise to them both. It was exactly why Mickey would never do well in the crime world. He lived too much in the here and now moment. Colin treated crime no different than chess. He stayed ahead by a few moves at all times, and it had served him well. 23 years of crime and chess, and he hardly ever lost at either. He got the distinct feeling Mickey couldn't tell a rook from a queen. So in anticipation of the kid's surefire screw-up, Colin took it upon himself to ensure that if someone had to die tonight, it would be someone that deserved it. He'd always hated Edward Ang. Ang always acted like he thought Colin was there to rob graves or something. Honestly, who the fuck does that? Let him find someone messing with his ma's grave. He'd eat the robbing bastard alive. Point was, Aang the asshole needed to die, and did. It flowed nicely, right up until he ran into the kids. He should have anticipated it. With Halloween just a few weeks away, their little libidos couldn't help themselves. Horror got teens horny. It was a fact of life. Give them a graveyard and they'd find a tombstone for humping. It grossed Colin out, but hey, who was he to judge? He just tore a man's face off with his teeth. Even with the unexpected couple showing up, things should have gone smoothly. Surprises popped up all the time on jobs, and Colin was always prepared to handle them. Mickey, however, was not. To his credit, the Mick didn't freak out. At least, not the way Colin expected him to. Licking his lips, Mickey said, "We gotta kill her. She's our final girl." "A what?" "Our final girl. Don't you watch horror movies?" "No, I'm too busy being a fucking adult, Mickey." That was a lie, and they both knew it. Colin had a tattoo of Lon Chaney Jr. in full get-up on his right bicep. Cassie Peterson took up the left. Exasperated by the tough guy act, but not willing to drop his point, Mickey grabbed Colin by the collar of his shirt. "Listen, man, you know how this goes. If she lives, we die. I don't want to die, Colin." Colin removed Mickey's hand from his collar, maybe with a little more force than necessary. "You're not gonna die, Mickey, unless you grab me like that again. Look at us. It'd take a pretty impressive feat of nature to do us in. And that girl, well, actually, she's got some pretty impressive..." "Colin, I get it, but I'm telling you, we have to kill her. If you won't, I will." That's when he took off, bounding through the dark at the young couple. Colin caught up just as the girl saw them. She screamed loud enough to impress Jamie Lee Curtis, loud enough to wake the entire fucking neighborhood, and Colin knew she'd have to die. It was senseless. He'd make Mickey pay for it later, but then and there he had to shut her up. Gnashing his teeth, he bit down hard on her jugular and tore. His hands probed at the wound, pulling it wider and letting the torrent of life unleash. He assumed that Mickey would take care of the boy. Once again, he was wrong. When he turned to check, he saw Mickey staring wide-eyed as the boy sprinted off. "Shit, Mickey, now we gotta eat him." Eat them? Did that crazy fucker say they were gonna eat Stacy and him? Dean was about to put 6 years of football to good use. He bolted out of there like a cheetah on a chase, only he was the one being hunted. He dodged and weaved through plots the same way he would through other players. In his time, he'd been a running back, a linebacker, and now a quarterback. Dean represented that perfect storm of explosive power, innate athletic ability, and intense focus and drive that football scouts pleasured themselves to at night. And right then and there, he was intensely focused on getting to his car and driving the hell away. He felt bad leaving Stacy's body behind. She was, well, he couldn't say sweet or nice, nor much else positive, but she was still a person, and no person deserved to be eaten by cannibals. He resolved to come back with the police and ensure they collected her. It made him sick thinking in terms like that. Collect her, as if she were a discarded doll. He needed to stop thinking of Stacy and start worrying about survival. In his rush to escape, he'd made a huge mistake and ran in the opposite direction of where they parked. After gaining his bearings, he realized he'd been running toward the back left corner of the property. The shiver that rose up his spine nearly made him lose his breath. One thought dominated his mind. Isn't that where they buried Fletcher Lawson? Mickey fucked up. He knew it. Colin knew it. That teen that ran off like Usain fucking Bolt on Red Bull knew it. Why then did Colin insist on yelling at him the entire time they were chasing the boy? Not like it'd do any good. They couldn't catch that kid if they were on bikes. Mickey guessed he'd probably put up a pretty good fight too. He planned to tell Colin all this if he could ever get a word in.
"Damn child, you let him get away. It was your fault. Your fault, Mickey. All on you. You wanted her dead, so we killed her. And now her little boyfriend is gonna get the cops involved. So what do you gotta say this time, Mickey?"
I don't think it's a boyfriend. What? Oh boy. Mickey was in for it on this one. Might as well say what he planned on saying now. Well, he took off pretty quickly. Didn't even check on the girl or try to defend her or anything. Either he's a terrible boyfriend or they weren't actually together. Colin said nothing, but his pace picked up as if he intended to leave Mickey behind. The only thing saving your ass right now is that kid is headed right where we need him. Mickey started to speak, stopped, and smiled. He hadn't known where they were headed until Colin pointed it out. They'd be at Fletcher's tomb in no time. He couldn't wait to see his brother again. Poor guy had been locked up in there for nearly a week now. He must have been going stir-crazy laying in that damn coffin waiting to be let out. But Brother Mickey was here to help. He couldn't stop what happened in Cali, but he'd damn well make sure to stick by Fletcher's side from now on. The police, of course, thought it was all over. Somehow they'd failed to realize or refuse to accept that Fletcher hadn't died. Fill him full of lead and watch him keep walking. Good old Fletch drilled it into them time and time again that joining him as a ghoul meant never fearing death again. Ghouls never died, they only hungered. And somewhere, deep down in the ground, Fletcher must have been very hungry. Luckily, a convenient sacrifice was running its way right to him. We're coming for you, brother, and we brought dinner. Even after noticing his mistake, Dean kept running in the wrong direction. Wrong to get to his car, anyway. Right if he wanted some added safety. See, Stacy wasn't the first girl he'd spent time with at this graveyard. In fact, he'd spent the last few weekends hanging out and talking with Ellie, the girl who worked the Saturday-Sunday shift at the guardhouse. They had a lot in common. She looked adorable even in her security getup, and she'd never pressured him to perform. Yeah, she had a few years on him, but right now they were just friends. If his plan worked and he survived these cannibalistic fucks thanks to her, he planned on taking her to the finest restaurant he could afford. Not if, but when it worked. Because at the end of the day, it didn't matter who these guys were. Everybody died the same when you filled them full of lead. No fucking way! Mickey felt like jumping up and down with joy. Not only had the boy ran away from safety, he ran headlong toward Fletcher's grave. Before then, Mickey only had a vague idea of where to find his brother's resting place. But as they followed the teen, Colin assured him they were heading directly to it. All they had to do was catch up to him before he took off again. Oh, Fletch was gonna love this. Dean felt like jumping up and down with joy. He was gonna kiss that girl next time he saw her. A few weekends ago, Ellie had confided in him that she felt unsafe when patrolling the backside of the cemetery. Specifically, she got an uneasy creeping up her arms ever since Fletcher Lawson had been buried back there. Instead of just avoiding the area, Ellie's solution had been to stash a gun right there at the tombstone, tucked in a vase of flowers. All he had to do was grab it and shoot before the guys chasing him caught up. He would love Ellie to the day he died. And thanks to her, that wouldn't be any time soon. Mickey had a plan. The kid probably didn't know they'd followed him, probably thought he could hide out somewhere and be safe. The fact that he picked Fletcher's tomb to do it had been the best bit of luck they'd had that night. His plan then was to rush the fool, lay him out before he even had a clue what happened. Despite Colin putting him down all the time, Mickey could do one thing very well: hit hard. In that regard, no one could accuse him of being a slouch, and right then he had surprise in his favor. He'd tackle the boy and bite him till he bled. Normally, the vegetarian side of Mickey would rebel against such an idea, but all he could think of was getting Fletch out of the coffin. Telling Colin about the plan was out of the question. He'd call it stupid, come up with something new, and have them sitting in the shadows until sunrise for the kid to come out. Fuck that. Let it be Colin's brother trapped in a wooden box and see how quickly he wanted to get moving. This was Mickey's flesh and blood, damn it, and he refused to let Colin run the show any longer. They made it up the last hill and saw the teen a few rows below them. Colin signaled for them to stop and tucked himself back against the shadows of a nearby tree. This was Mickey's only chance. With his mind made up, Mickey risked a nervous glance over at his partner, saw he wasn't looking, and gave Colin a shove. Colin would try to stop him, he reasoned, so Mickey needed a distraction to give himself a head start. He got that, and more. Colin was so confused by the sudden contact that he didn't even attempt to stop himself as he fell. Mickey and Colin shared a moment of eye contact that relayed perfectly Colin's last message. "Congratulations, Mickey. You managed to fuck up again. Then Colin's head bounced off a tombstone, and Mickey cried out. Why was there so much blood? That wasn't right. Couldn't be right. They were ghouls. Ghouls didn't die, but Colin definitely looked dead. That, or Mickey had made him so mad he decided to flop around like a fish out of water. Oh, yeah, now there were blood bubbles coming from his mouth. Yeah, he was dead. Damn. Mickey really had messed up this time. But how? Fletcher had done the ritual with Colin the same night he initiated Mickey. They'd both brought sacrifices, virgins of course, chanted the prayer to Mordegon, and ate their victims. What had gone wrong? Maybe Colin's sacrifice hadn't actually been a virgin. That had to be it. Poor Colin. Had he known the girl wasn't really a virgin? Actually, considering Colin's history, he may have been the one to seduce her first. Ah, maybe that explained it. Fletcher got it wrong, and you had to be a virgin for it to work. If that were the case, then Mickey was still fine, but it had definitely explained why the ritual failed for Colin. But then something hard and ceramic hit him on the back of the head, and he crumpled. When the scumbag opened his eyes a few seconds later, Dean made sure the first thing he saw was the gun. Dean had watched the guy push his partner, watched the realization slowly dawn on his face that the other man was dead. He almost felt sorry for him. Obviously the guy wasn't all there up top. Then Dean remembered what they'd done to Stacy and what they planned to do to him. Hard to feel sorry for someone that wanted to gnaw on your arm while he was still wearing it. What the fuck, man? Did you just hit me with a vase? What are you, James fucking Bond? Mickey thought that sounded a lot like something Colin would have said. Dean refused to take crap from someone who'd accidentally murdered his partner with someone else's deathbed. Yeah, nice meeting you, Hannibal. Or I guess you're a little closer to Leatherface, huh? What are you doing, shopping for a new cereal bowl? It upset him that his night had been so screwed up for a joke like that to be funny. Dean would be seeing a psychiatrist after this for sure. Oh yeah, there's some major psychological damage going on tonight. Mickey barely paid attention to the banter. The kid's bravado would only last until Fletcher showed up. Mickey was sure of it. So sure, in fact, that he couldn't help but put a little fear into the boy. Keep making jokes, asshole. You ever heard of Fletcher Lawson? Well, you're looking at his next of kin. And you know what else? He's not dead. He's just laying there waiting for me to let him loose. And when I do, we're going to wreak havoc on this town for what it did to us. Dean just stared at Mickey as if he were a pathetic creature that needed to be put out of its misery. You don't really believe that, right? I mean, everyone in this town knows what happened to Fletcher Lawson. Hell, the whole state heard. He's not coming back, man. I don't care if you thought he was a vampire or a zombie or what. That fucker's toast. Anger didn't well up in Mickey so much as it boiled over all at once. He saw in an instant how the next few minutes would play out. He'd lunge at the kid, catching him by surprise, and wrest the gun from his stupid grip. A strong kick would send him to the ground, and then Mickey would have some fun. Just to prove to the boy that the Lawsons were the real deal, he'd shoot himself before tossing the gun. The little punk would probably be crying and crapping by then, begging for mercy that wouldn't come. Mickey would really lay into him at that point, put him in as much pain as possible before tearing him apart for Fletcher's first feast back. Mickey's face broke out in a smile as he jumped at Dean. He hit the boy full on, chest to chest, and bounced right over onto his ass. Sitting there, coccyx aching, he shook his head as if to erase what had just happened. The gun went off in a knee-jerk reaction, and suddenly a hole existed in Mickey's foot where it had no business existing. He screeched, sounding more like a squeaky door than a person. Dean cried out too, taken back by the sudden reverberation in his hands, but pleased with the result. Mickey hissed and hemmed and hawed, and finally settled enough to yell words through the pain. Why? Why would you do that? Jesus Christ, man, are you serious? Dean looked almost pained by the question. You asked me the same thing when I hit you. Can you just not talk? Honestly, I'm starting to feel sorry for the fucking cannibal. Hey, I am not a cannibal! That's disgusting! Both men stared one another down, one in physical pain and the other emotional. Finally, Dean broke the silence. Your brother killed a lot of people, and I'm thinking maybe you did too. I watched you murder Stacy. I'm pretty sure Mr. Ang is dead too, right?
I don't know what you guys had planned, but Fletcher Lawson is every bit as dead as your buddy over there. And now you're gonna join them, you sick bastard. Wait! Awe lit up in Mickey's eyes, and all that abruptly turned into utter terror. Are you a virgin? The look on Dean's face was answer enough. It would be the last thing Mickey Lawson saw before the gun went off. 5 hours later, Dean had given his statement to the police and found himself sitting at Starbucks with Ellie, sharing the story he'd just promised the officials he would never share. She listened to every word before wrapping him up in a kiss that lasted so long other customers became uncomfortable. Meanwhile, in a small, cold building west of the cemetery, the coroner and his assistant confirmed again what any sane man already knew. Fletcher Lawson was as dead as the dodo and had been for over a week. Beside him in his grave, he'd soon be joined by his equally dead brother Mickey and their best friend, career criminal Colin Halick. Human remains were found in the bellies of all three. 2 had died of gunshot wounds. The last, killed by dumb damn luck.
Alright, that's it, guys. I don't know how this is going to come out. I don't know what you guys are going to think of it. Obviously, this is very amateur, but I hope you can get some enjoyment out of it. Let me know what you think below, if this is something I should never attempt again, or if it's something that you want me to maybe put a little more time into and see how it goes. I have stories that are science fiction, fantasy, horror, young adult, a little bit all around, some poetry, things like that. So let me know. I appreciate you for joining me, and I hope that you enjoyed it. And I'll be back again soon with some regular book-related content. So have a great evening and a fantastic day tomorrow. Cheers. It didn't matter that other than you to sully hollowed ground. It's gonna take me forever. Might as well see what he had planned on saying any night. I say.
God damn child! But let him get away. It was your fault.
Try this again.